Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Angry Jay here. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm going to do my best to still bring you some hard-hitting NHL 94 team breakdowns as I now begin my tour through the Patrick division after previously wrapping up the Adams division with my most recent episode about the Ottawa Senators. Today's topic will be the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they are one of the most misconceived teams in this game, but let me just get something straight right away. For anybody that plays more of the SNES version, this video does not apply to you because in the SNES version, Pittsburgh is easily the top team in the game and are probably in their own tier. Boston kind of comes close, but Pittsburgh is by far and away the best team in the Super Nintendo version. In the Genesis, a lot of people do think that Pittsburgh is a top team, especially those that are a little bit more inexperienced in online and tournament play. But I'm here today to tell you that Pittsburgh is not a top team, and thus they should be avoided in those top tier matchups. And we're going to jump into that real quick. First, I just want to talk about Pittsburgh in 1992-93 in the NHL season that year. They went 56-21-7 for 119 points. They won their division that year and thus were the #1 seed. And they made it to the division final, but then lost to a Pierre Turgeon-less New York Islanders squad in 7 games. It was a huge upset, and this concluded Pittsburgh's run at a three-peat as they had won the Stanley Cup in the previous 2 seasons. So this was kind of the beginning of the end of their dynasty. They went on a slow downhill descent towards mediocrity. They had some more playoff years, yes, to be sure, but they were never quite the same after their loss to the New York Islanders this year. As far as the team advantages in NHL 94, they have a high home ice advantage, which is a really nice thing to have for them. They get these nice big bonuses at home, so you're going to get some nice boosts to your players. And on the road, they have an average disadvantage, so they'll have some penalties, but they won't be as noticeable as, say, if you took Philadelphia on the road, who has a high disadvantage. So, as I mentioned before, Pittsburgh is not a top team in the Genesis version, or nor are they a Tier 1 team. They're actually a Tier 4 team, and they're kind of a weird Tier 4 team because within their tier, they have a little bit more skill than some of these other teams, but they're such a poor skating team, and they are such a CB checking reliant team that if a player doesn't even know how to CB check with their guys, Pittsburgh becomes even a bigger liability. They might even drop down another tier, Tier 5. They just really tumble further down the list the less you know how to CB check or use players with that are very heavy, because Pittsburgh is loaded with several heavy players. Some of their best matchups are against St. Louis, Toronto, Edmonton, and New Jersey. You can stretch them out against Washington, even though Washington's in their same tier. I just don't think they necessarily match up very well with Washington. And then also, you can take Pittsburgh up the ladder against Boston, as Boston is kind of a similar team, but a little bit more balanced. Pittsburgh can skate with them, which is what allows them to be competitive in that matchup. But other than that, I wouldn't really recommend taking Pittsburgh up the ladder, even though they do have some players that have some pretty good skills. So Pittsburgh, why might you want to use Pittsburgh in a matchup? Well, they have the highest skilled player in the game, Mario Lemieux. When you add up all the attribute points that he has the most attribute points of any player in NHL 94. But that doesn't necessarily make him the best player in 94, and we'll get into that a little bit later. As I already touched on, Pittsburgh is a CB checking dominant team where they have to use a special technique where heavier players are now allowed to check lighter players, because in the Genesis version there is a weight bug where lighter players can check heavier players more easily. There's a special technique. I have a video about that called CB checking. If you want to check that out and get a more detailed description, the short and dirty of it is CB checking allows heavier players to check lighter players who are carrying the puck. One other strength that Pittsburgh has is that they are a very heady roster. They have high awareness ratings for a lot of their players, so they're going to be in good spots in the ice to be successful. They also are an agile team. They're not necessarily fast, but a lot of their players do have higher agility ratings, which does help them a little bit when it comes to making quick decisions with your players, or that first step that they might have on the ice. And also, lastly, their AI goalie, Tom Barrasso, is pretty strong in computer mode. In manual user mode, he's a little bit different. He's actually weak in a manual user mode. When we look at his ratings, I'll tell you why he's weak there, but that is one of the weaknesses Pittsburgh has, is that their manual goalie control is a little bit weak. This is also a slow team. They have no elite speed, which means they don't have a player with a speed rating of 5 or higher. So that makes it a little bit tricky for them to match up with some of the better skating teams in the game. They also have no skilled weight bug players, so you really can't mix and match with Pittsburgh. You pretty much have just your starting lineup and not a lot of depth. And that lack of depth carries over not on just the forward unit, but also the defensive unit. So you can't really even match up one place or another. You're stuck with what you have, really. They also have, every player on this team has an obvious weakness. Even if they have a lot of strengths, there's just something that really takes them down a notch and keeps them from being an elite player. And lastly, I don't think the forwards on this team necessarily complement each other very well. They're just too heavy CB check reliant, and there's not enough shooters. So it's just, I think a lot of their problems compound each other. But with that said, they still do have some decent players, and I think when it comes to your forwards, your best forward line is going to be Jaromir Jagr on the left, Mario Lemieux in the middle, and Joe Mullen on the right. You're going to want to take out Kevin Stevens, as leaving Kevin Stevens in leaves this line far too heavy, and he's actually a little underskilled, I think, compared to Joe Mullen. So first, let's jump into Jaromir Jagr here, the last active player from NHL 94. Last year, he had a short stint with the Calgary Flames. That didn't exactly go to plan, so he then went back to his home country in the Czech Republic, played for his hometown team Kladno, and finished out the season there. Last I heard, he is still training and looking for a contract outside of his country, and if nothing materializes, he will likely play for Kladno again this season. But it's kind of interesting. 25 years later, still have one player active in the professional ranks. So Jaromir Jagr, NHL 94 version, very good player with 5 agility, 4 speed. He's only got the 4 offensive awareness, so he's actually a little bit low on the offensive awareness for this team, but still plenty enough to do some damage. 2 defensive awareness. Where he's really going to hurt you and madden you in one area is his shooting. He's only got a 3-shot power, 3-shot accuracy, and again, these are ratings out of 6. There are 6 or 7 different ranges for these attributes. So the 6 out of 6 is a perfect. 0 out of 6 is the worst rating you can have. So 3 is a little bit below average for a forward, really, when it comes to shooting. So you have to get in close with Jaromir Jagr, and that's going to be tricky when he's 220 pounds. He is accessible to a lot of players when it comes to just weight bug checking. I mean, despite the fact that he has 5 stick handling and 5 agility, as I noted earlier, he's going to have a really tough time getting in close enough to make his shot relevant. So you really want to take advantage of his 5 stick handling and 4 passing out on the wing to be a playmaker to set up Mario Lemieux. That's where he's really going to be able to flourish. And then also on the defensive side of the ice, if you know how to CB check with the player, he is going to be a very good option for you with his 4-check rating, 220 pounds, and very good skate ratings. He's going to be a CB monster out there. Even in AI mode, he's going to be checking people with that 4-check rating pretty regularly, really. So even if he's not producing on offense, even if he's missing a few chances here and there, just keep him out there. He's going to help you on defense, and he's going to be good out on the wing. He's definitely your best puck carrying winger, despite his weight. So definitely a vital part of your line. An even more vital part of your line is Super Mario Lemieux, Le Magnifique as called back home. He has a 5 agility rating with 4 speed, so same exact as Jagr. He's a right-handed shot with 6 offensive awareness and 4 defensive awareness, so he should be filling out those one-timing areas nicely for you, and Jagr should be hopefully finding them, because that's going to be their main form of offense is one-time shooting. And Lemieux will pot those chances with 4 shot power, 6 accuracy. He is just a dead eye from pretty far out. He may not get those super long range shots that guys like Tomas Sandstrom or Brett Hull will get, but he will be much more consistent than Brett Hull with those shots that he does have from a little bit closer. Also, Mario Lemieux, 6 passing, 6 stick handling, pretty nice. He does have the most attribute points in the game, so no surprise there that he has perfect ratings. And 220 pound weight means he is a target for weight bug players and even middleweights, but with 6 stick handling and 5 agility, he is the most well-equipped heavyweight player in the game to shrug off these checks. He will be able to elude checks with his agility, and even with his stick handling rating, he will be able to kind of shake checks off by doing a little off-balance animation. But in this animation, he will maintain possession of the puck as opposed to losing it like most other players would. So if anybody's going to be able to run through a defense, despite being a very heavy player, Mario Lemieux is the most well-equipped, but don't take that as an invitation to just try and deke entire teams. His best form of offense is still one-timers, in close deking, that sort of thing. You could take him one-on-one with somebody, but don't get crazy and try and take him one-on-three. He's likely to be unsuccessful there. But he's easily the best offensive player on this roster, and also a very well-equipped defensive player with 220-pound weight rating and 55 checking, so that's a 3 out of 6. He's going to be very good at CB checking and can be used on the forecheck to just cause some havoc and create some turnovers and hopefully set up some easy chances for his teammates, if not himself. So Mario Lemieux, not a top player in the game, but a very good player nonetheless, and should be respected by your opponents. Lastly, Joe Mullen is the sniping component on this roster, from the right wing position with 4 agility, 3 speed, so he's not fleet of foot by any means, but with 4 offensive awareness and a 3 shot power to go along with a 5 accuracy rating, he's going to be an important contributor. If you can get a couple goals out of him a game, Pittsburgh's offense becomes much more viable, and they can play from ahead in these situations where, they're very good defensive teams. If you can get ahead with Pittsburgh early, whether it be Joe Mullen or Mario Lemieux sniping home a couple one-timers, you're going to be in really good shape. As far as puck carrying, Mullen does leave a lot to desire. He's only got a 3 passing and 4 stick handling, so he's not the best puck carrying winger. He's just more of a guy to come in on the wing, slap home a one-timer, clean up some rebounds, that sort of thing. He is their lightest forward at 188 pounds, but he's not much of a checker, with only a 4 agility, 3 speed rating, and he's not much of a lightweight. He's more of a middleweight type of guy. He's not fleet of foot enough to really be a big defensive difference maker, so just try and use him with the poke checks and just be annoying with him. You don't really want to just go all out with him and try and cause havoc. He's just more of a positional player on defense, but on offense he's going to be pretty nice in terms of shooting, but just don't rely on him to carry the puck. So that, I think, is your best line right there. But some people do really love to CB check with all their hearts, and Kevin Stevens will allow them to do that. He is a 3 agility skater with 4 speed. He's got 5 offensive awareness, so he'll really be filling out those one-timing areas. But he's not as good of a shooter as Joe Mullen with only a 3 shot power and 4 accuracy, so that's a little lackluster, especially for such a large player, because again, he has the same issue as Jagr. It's tough for him to get to the net with that weight, and he's even a worse skater than Jagr, so I can't really see him getting in close to make his shot rating viable often enough to consider icing him. But some people love having that extra CB check guy, and he's actually fairly well skilled for a CB check guy. 4 passing, 4 stick handling, out on the wing, it's good enough, but again, that skating and this weight, he's really at a disadvantage, and he's not nearly as good of a checker as you might think, with only a 3. So he'll be an okay CB checker, but that lack of agility is going to make it really tricky. You're just going to have to go sell out with him and hope you get lucky by lining somebody up that's a little unsuspecting. But I just don't think Kevin Stevens brings a lot of balance to this line, but he is an option nonetheless. And this really concludes any viable players from Pittsburgh that you can ice, respectively. But there are some other options that you may want to consider in certain matchups. Martin Straka is the weight bug player here. He's got 3 agility, 3 speed, shot power 2, accuracy 2, passing 3, stick handling 2. This is really before he made a name for himself as a player. So all these ratings are pretty lackluster. At 180 pounds, he's your weight bug option. This is the entirety of it. So if you're willing to ice a player who is severely underskilled, and some of these tier 4, tier 5 matchups, that's not, totally out of the realm of his capabilities, he could be an option, but he's very lackluster, and he's just really a guy out there to cause problems more than on defense and create things on offense. There's also Ron Francis, Hall of Famer, but he really didn't get a fair shake in this game. 4 agility, 3 speed, pretty lackluster there. Only 4 awareness on offense and defense. He just, again, nothing spectacular. He's got 4 ratings across the board except for a 3 in shooting. 212 pounds, 4 checking. He's going to be a decent CB checker, but the lack of speed, again, problematic on a team that's already slow enough. So I can't recommend him either unless, Lemieux gets hurt or Jagr gets hurt. All-time great, yes, NHL 94 great? No, unfortunately. And then there's Rick Tocchet, 2 agility, 2 speed, 5 offensive awareness, which is really nice to go with a 4 shot power, 5 accuracy, but 212 pounds, you know, and 2-2 skating. It's really a gamble to put him out there. Yes, I said gamble to put Rick Tocchet out there, and I wouldn't really recommend it because that lack of speed, lack of agility, it's too problematic. I mean, unless you're just bereft of injuries and you need a guy who can shoot, Tocchet's fine, yes, but you never want him carrying the puck on his stick for more than a second, because if he's doing that, he's hurting your team. He just lacks all sorts of dynamicism, and he's purely a one-trick pony, and that trick is shooting, and he might not ever get close enough to the net to do it. So these are your options in Pittsburgh. Lack of depth, to be sure. On defense, the lack of depth is even more alarming, but hey, at least your starters are pretty good. You got Larry Murphy here, very competent defenseman, probably even, I should say, good defenseman, to be honest, especially now that CB checking has been discovered. As of a few years ago, Larry Murphy was not considered a top defenseman. Now he's probably considered, you know, top 20 at the very least. He's got 4 agility, 3 speed. He's a right-handed defenseman, so you probably want to put him on the right-hand side. He's got 4 offensive awareness to go with 5 defensive. So that's pretty good right there. He's got 4 shot power and 2 accuracy, which is good for a defenseman, but not overwhelming. His best ratings, I think, are his passing and stick handling are 4 each. So he's going to help you spring those breakout passes and outlets to just get Pittsburgh rolling in the right direction. 220 pounds, 3 checking. He's going to be a decent CB checker from the back line, but not overwhelmingly so, because the lack of speed can be a little problematic against faster guys like Peter Klima, and really that's the only guy, and Peter Bondra. Those are the 2 guys he's going to have to really worry about within his tier. He might struggle with, but everybody else he should probably be pretty good against. And if not, nothing else, you can poke check with him, as he's very positionally sound with a high defensive awareness. He's going to be snuffing out a lot of passes in the slot, and he's going to be staying home on defense quite often. So he's actually a really nice player to have on this blue line. And in tandem with Ulf Samuelsson, this is actually a decent pairing, I think. 4 agility, 4 speed, so he's even a better skater than Murphy. Only 3 offensive awareness, but 5 defensive, and that's what you really want, as you know, Samuelsson's going to be another guy snuffing out passes through the slot and just playing really good positional hockey. But he's also going to be an absolute force with the body. He's got 5 checking, so in AI mode, he may be positionally sound for a moment, but he's also liable to just go out and start checking people left and right, which can be helpful, but also can be hurtful if he gets a little undisciplined with it. As a shooter, you don't really need to use him as a shooter. He's got 3 power, 0 accuracy. There's no real reason to take him on offense, especially with only 3 passing and 3 stick handling. He's best suited to stay within his own zone and just make smart short passes. 204 pounds, 5 checking, 4-4 skating. He's going to be a monster on the CB check. He's going to check a lot of guys within his weight range, and maybe even guys that are 212, 220 pounds he can get as well. But if they're 220 pounds, you may as well just weight bug check them, as you only need to be 16 pounds less than the player you're attempting to check to be successful with a weight bug check. So Ulf Samuelsson provides a lot of options for you to be successful on defense. He's just a really nice player to have, provided you don't try to go crazy on offense with him. And really, to be honest, these are the only 2 real options on this blue line. I mean, yeah, you're going to run into some penalty issues or injuries, of course. So if that happens, Paul Stanton is your best bet. 3 agility, 3 speed. His awareness ratings are pretty low with only a 3 on defense. His shooting is 4, and his accuracy is a 1, which is, you know, pretty good for a reserve defenseman, but you're never really going to shoot with him. The really nice thing about him is his 4 pass accuracy. So you're not, if you lose Larry Murphy, you're not going to lose any sort of puck movement ability. So that's a really nice thing to have. But the lack of stick handling means you need to be a bit more careful when you try and create your own space with Stanton, because the puck will just fly right off the stick if anybody comes near him. 204 pounds, 3 checker. He's going to be an okay CB checker, but he's really a middleweight who's probably just better off poke checking more than anything else. Another guy you might see, or you might want to use, is Taglianetti. He's got 3 agility, 2 speed, and that right there really hurts him in a lot of matchups. 3 defensive awareness. His puck ratings aren't really worth noticing, and he's got a 3 stick handle and a 2 passing. Those are kind of lackluster. But at 212 pounds and a 4 checker, if you can line somebody up, he's going to knock him down, and he's going to be better than options, say, like Jim Pake, who is your default sub in some cases. You probably want to take him out and put in one of Stanton or Taglianetti. Or lastly, Kjell Samuelsson, Ulf's brother. He's really an interesting player to say the least. 2 agility, 2 speed. He's got 4 shot power, but you'll never ever get to use it with his skate ratings. 3 stick handle, 2 passing, so pretty lackluster on offense. But man, is this guy a behemoth on defense at 252 pounds, 4 checker. If you can somehow manage to line up a CB check with Kjell Samuelsson, he is certainly going to be successful with it. Just good luck getting in that position with that poor skate rating. So really, Samuelsson, Murphy, your best bet, and try to avoid using your depth as much as possible, but Paul Stanton's probably your best option if you have to. Lastly, goalies, Tom Barrasso, good in AI mode. He might win you some games at home when he has a strong boost to his rating, but otherwise he's pretty lackluster. He's got 4 agility, which doesn't seem that bad, but everything else, nothing spectacular. 4 puck control, 4 on his stick side, 4 ratings on his glove side, but the issue is his weight. Much like every other player on this team, weight is an issue, especially when every player on this team has a high weight. High weight for a goalie means that they're going to have a harder time accelerating and decelerating and turning within their crease. So this is not good for manual AI. You want a lighter goalie with high agility. Barrasso is one of the heaviest goalies in the game, if not the heaviest, up there with Sean Burke. And with only 4 agility, that's not really enough to compensate and make him a very mobile goalie. So if you can get the chest protector in front of the puck with Barrasso, you're doing good things. But if you can't keep the chest protector in front of it, you're likely going to be in a lot of trouble. And the backup's not really an option. So he's really your only guy that you can use. So Pittsburgh, just to wrap this up with a nice little summary, embrace the CB checking. If you're going to use Pittsburgh on a consistent basis, you better know how to CB check with them, because that's going to be their best bet to success is CB check and just playing strong defense. You'll also want to utilize quick puck movement. This is not a fast team, but they are a fairly well-skilled team, especially in passing. I mean, they have their defensemen are good passers, and Jagr's a good passer, and especially Lemieux. So just work that puck, pass it around, make that play fast for you. Also with Pittsburgh, it can be easy to forget to shoot the puck with them because their chances can be few and far between. But when you get a chance, even if it's not a high percentage one, just put it on net. Maybe something crazy will happen. You get a good bounce or something. Just shoot the puck with them, essentially. Also, just use your brain out there. This isn't like a team like Buffalo where you can just give the puck to a couple different players and just try and deke through everybody. Pittsburgh, you got to play a little bit more hockey. You got to play more positional. You got to wait for your chances and hope your opponent makes mistakes so you can have an odd man rush. If you can get 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s with Pittsburgh, you're going to increase your chances of success tenfold, because if you go 1-on-3 with Jaromir Jagr, you're probably asking for trouble. Lastly, just be early with Barrasso in net. He is one of those harder goalies to get moving, especially if you're trying to shut down a cross-crease play or a one-timer. So you may want to avoid making that last-ditch effort with your defenseman to try and stop a play and just immediately go over to goalie control to anticipate whatever might happen. So I think those things are the most important to keep in mind with Pittsburgh. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in with a matchup against Edmonton. Edmonton is one of the more balanced matchups, I think, for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is probably the better team overall in terms of team balance, but Peter Klima for Edmonton is easily the best player on the ice. He is a very dynamic player, very fast, and can actually cause a lot of problems for Pittsburgh if left unchecked, and if the player using Pittsburgh is unfamiliar with CB checking. Again, without the CB check, Pittsburgh is an even harder team to use, and this is one of the mistakes I see a lot in tournament play, especially by more inexperienced players, is that they'll put Pittsburgh up against teams like Chicago, Detroit, Buffalo, really anybody in the top tier, and these are all mistakes. Because Pittsburgh, while it is conceived that, you have Mario Lemieux, you have Jaromir Jagr, this is easily going to be the best team in the game. It's not going to be the case, especially in the Genesis. The Super Nintendo, yeah, they're the best team in the game, as I mentioned earlier. In Genesis, they're not. And the difference between them and the Tier 1 and Tier 2 teams is stark. And if you select a matchup in a tournament with Pittsburgh and a Tier 1 or Tier 2 team, you could be putting yourself at a severe disadvantage from the get-go. So this is something you'll want to keep in mind when selecting matchups is, just stay within the tier with Pittsburgh. And you might want to be familiar with playing against Pittsburgh more than anything else, because if you're facing up against another inexperienced player who may not have seen these videos but you have, you may want to say Pittsburgh and a Tier 3 team or a Tier 4 team that you're comfortable with, and maybe they'll select Pittsburgh, and then you get another team that's a little bit better balanced, maybe to your playing style, and you'll have a good little advantage because they'll think that they can just run right through you with the best player in the game when that's not necessarily the case. You'll be able to lock them down on defense pretty well and make their life a lot more difficult than they might have expected, and you'll get yourself a nice win when you might otherwise have been in a situation where they got a team that they're a bit more comfortable with and was actually a pretty good team. Like say you picked Dallas Boston or something and they got Dallas and they just love fast players. That might be a bit more of an even situation, whereas if you give a guy Pittsburgh and they don't necessarily know what's in their hands, then you could be at a stark advantage, and this would be your chance to take away a game and move on in the tournament. So if you're just trying to learn some things before the tournament, you're going to play in the King of 93 tournament in Vancouver at the end of next month on October 28th. You'll definitely want to be up to date on where teams rank, and Pittsburgh will surprise you because a lot of people think they're one of the better teams, and they're not. I know I personally don't necessarily care for Pittsburgh all that much. I mean, they're a good team if you know how to use one-timers and if you know how to pass the puck, and if you're just a very technical player who's patient. But if you're a player who just wants to brush the puck up with whoever is possesses it, Pittsburgh's going to be a huge issue for you in your hands. So you may want to just completely steer clear of Pittsburgh if possible when calling a matchup, and that's fine. You can avoid some teams just as long as you still know how to play against them, because your opponent might pick Pittsburgh. You might pick Pittsburgh, LA or something. This is your chance to pick LA and let them have Pittsburgh, and if you know how to play against Pittsburgh, it should be a pretty easy matchup in that one. If you lose that game, then you're probably really outclassed, and it would have been difficult to win in any matchup, but this is where you have a chance to just give yourself an easy W against an opponent who just doesn't necessarily know what's going on. But maybe you want to use Pittsburgh as a kind of a trick up your sleeve for whatever reason. They do have some good players. Mario Lemieux is certainly a top player, and he's actually way above the average caliber player within his tier. So in terms of Tier 4 teams, he's easily the best player. I mean, especially skill-wise, there's just no comparison. He's going to rip up some of these goalies, especially on the weaker end of the spectrum. Guys like Curtis Joseph, Chris Terreri, Don Beaupre, especially in AI mode, he's just going to light them up. There's nothing they're going to be able to do about that. And then Jagr, he's a very good defensive player. He's definitely a decent puck carrier. He can be a little lackluster some games, but more often than not, he's definitely going to be your best winger. And he can create a pretty decent tandem with Lemieux if they get rolling. But Lemieux's definitely going to be your main horse on offense, and he's also going to be a force on defense. So you really want to just make sure he stays involved in the game, because he's going to be a difference maker in this tier. If Pittsburgh was in Tier 1, Tier 2, he'd have a lot more problems. But in Tier 4, he should just be eating people alive, especially if you know how to use them. Guys like Joe Mullen in Tier 4 are actually fairly okay. Despite the lack of speed and the lack of passing, he's also going to be able to tear up a lot of these goalies with his shot accuracy, and if you can get him in close, he's going to be very successful. And then lastly, your defense. Again, they're very heady. They stay home. They're very physical when they need to be, especially in user control. They can be, and they just know how to move the puck well. And it's a very good defensive duo. They're actually a little underrated, I think, because before CB checking was discovered a couple years ago, they were actually kind of a little bit maligned. They're a little bit slow on a team that's already slow enough, on a team that's already very heavy. So they weren't really doing their team a lot of favors. But now that we know that heavier players can check lighter players with a certain button technique, I'll try to show it here. No. So CB, just to quickly elaborate on that, is a checking technique that can be used with a player. So what you want to do is you want to hit the C button to instigate a check, but before that check makes contact with the puck carrier, you want to hit the B button so that user control is removed. And once you remove user control, the weight bug check is no longer in effect, and thus heavier players can now check lighter players. So if this is a really big tool, a really big thing to consider when it comes to Pittsburgh is that, if you know how to CB check, they become a much different team. They kind of transform into a defensive juggernaut. They still have issues on offense, yes, but at least you have some recourse now, and that recourse is very important because it keeps the game in a more manageable fashion for Pittsburgh. They're not designed to score 7-8 goals a game. So if you can keep your opponent down towards 3 goals a game, you're going to see a lot more success with Pittsburgh. And that's just kind of how you have to model your game with Pittsburgh. You don't really want to bank on those huge offensive explosions. You just want to try and initiate a lead early in the game, get up by 2 or 3 goals, and then just play really solid hockey after that. Make the neutral zone just an absolute disaster for your opponent to go through, and just turn the game into it's an absolute mess to play. So that's kind of what I meant when I talked about when I was reviewing Pittsburgh. Just play smart, use your brain, don't overextend yourself. There are definitely moments where you can strike with Pittsburgh physically, like right there. Doug Waite was just easy pickings for Samuelson, so I CB checked him. Those are the moments you just want to kind of hammer in on your opponent when they're just getting the puck on their stick and they can't really make that first move to get away. Those are the times to strike with Pittsburgh and be successful in shutting things down. Otherwise, just kind of hold the line and make your opponent do something really special to get a goal on you. So that, I think, wraps up Pittsburgh pretty well. Just make sure to remember that you should not be picking them up against the elite teams in this game in tournament play. You want to keep them within their tier 4 teams like St. Louis, Toronto, Edmonton, New Jersey. That is where they're going to be most successful. And if your opponent calls a matchup that's like Pittsburgh, Calgary, now you know to pick Calgary, because Calgary is just going to have a big advantage there, and that's where you can take advantage of some things in tournament play. So that's Pittsburgh Penguins. Thank you for joining me. Next episode is going to be the Washington Capitals, so I'm going to be excited to get to present that one to you. But if you like this episode, feel free to give it a thumbs up or leave a comment down below, just mentioning what you liked, or if you have a question or any concerns, just throw them down there. I'll be happy to answer them. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. All right, thank you very much.